Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Just a quick change of format for this video. I'm just giving a brief overview of a recent animation that I did and the steps, or the basic steps that went into it. I have done previous videos covering all of these before, but yeah, I hope this one helps. If not, or if you do have any other questions relating to it, then by all means feel free. And yeah, hope you enjoy. So this is just a quick view of the setup we've got here. Down here we've got the image editor. I'll keep this for like references. Got a section here for all the tools, or frame I should say. Another one, the outliner, just to show where everything is. And for the 3D viewer, I keep this one off perspective just in case I need to move anything on the Z-axis, but this one I normally keep in top-down view, just primarily for use for grease pencil and putting things together. So for the first part, it's basically just working out exactly what I wanted to see here. I knew it was basically going to be a little action scene on top of this artifact that I had in the distance. So it's a case of just working out what I wanted to see roughly. I had like a few initial keyframes, and I basically just keep adding rather than thinking about in-betweening and all that kind of stuff. I just initial keyframes of how I wanted the fight to go, and then gradually add more and more breakdowns as you go along until I basically got out the action here in this rough form. From here I added the perspective for the background as I'm showing you here, so it's just basically a rough idea of how the background was going to look, and this was going to help for the next part where we go to 3D. Okay, back to the figure work. So as I said earlier, I basically drew out exactly the kind of action I wanted with the perspective. Once you're happy with it, all of that, is a case of just adding more keyframes or breakdown frames rather than thinking of in-betweening, just adding more and more breakdowns to flesh out the actual action and make it a bit more smoother. And once I'm happy with that, it's just a case of detail. So add another layer, or copy the layer, same keyframes. There we go. And then as things get a bit more complicated, I had to work out the armor here, for example. I didn't do everything that was on the character design, just for simplicity's sake. But another layer, added the armor to it. And then you see here I've got another section for the hair. And after that, I think here we are, the lines. This is basically once you're happy with the way it looks. So if I get rid of that for now, I'll get that for now, and that, and that. So that's the lines. And then it was a case of adding the flats. And what I did here is I used to do what I do normally when I'm just doing still images. I would have like a mask for this kind of thing and then add another layer for flats afterwards, which I did initially in previous animations, but there's so much work. You're basically doubling up your work here. So I do the same thing, just using the normal flats layer as a flats and a mask, which I would add further details to on the second layer, which I've got here, colours too. So you can see there the extra bits I've added on using the first layer as a mask. And again, after that, this second one I'll basically use as like a paint over, just filling in any details Then it's a case of the shade mask layer, which I had here. And what I do here, this is, instead of having like separate colours for shade, what I want to do is work out what the basic colours are and then adjust it according to what the surrounding background is going to be later. So for simplicity's sake, I just do a flat mask here, and I use that when we're compositing to work out where the shade is going to be and how that's going to look. I have got videos on that. If you want to look through the playlist, I do detail that further there. Okay, so the 3D stuff. So here we've got 3 cameras set up with a basic bit of modelling I've done to look like this surface that should be running on. If I go to the view, cameras, blah blah blah, set cameras, that's the front view for the first part. And as I said, we've already worked out the perspective with the grease pencil earlier, so I just wanted a bit of footage showing these different perspectives. This is the front view. I'll go to the second camera, which I've set up as a kind of like a 3/4 view. So I've got some footage for that, and I rendered out this to view later. If I go to the third one, and that's the side on. Yeah. So as I said, I've rendered out this section of footage and have it playing back on a image sequence on some panels that we'll see later. So here we've got playback of the background that we've just finished, and I'm just matching it up to the perspective lines that we drew earlier. As you can see down here, we've got the keyframes for it, and it's literally just animated images that you can see here, moving around to match the perspective that we got earlier. Okay, so effects. For the energy blasts and that and general effects, I'm still early days on that, I'm afraid, so you'll have to pardon the way it looks. And I did go for a few versions before I settled on the one that you see in the final one, but I'd included here a rough of one of the earlier ones I wanted to use. Anyway, again, it's a case that I had this sorted out at the block out stage, so I knew basically where everything was going to go at that stage, and it's just a case of just detailing. So the keyframes for that are done. That was the initial one. Let's put the proper one back on, wherever it is. It's version 2. So this was the rough for the one I decided to use. I just used a flat colour for it. It doesn't really matter what colour it is because you can always adjust it in the compositor later. What have we got here? This was the base again for the smoke. Sorry, this is the clouds in the background. There's the detail for it as well. I'll just turn that off for now. And then obviously where the blasts were hitting, I have the impact blast for that, so I'll put that on so you can see that. So again, here is basically what the blasts look like once I've rendered that, I've rendered that as a pass by itself, obviously with an alpha channel behind it. Play it back and then play with that in here in the shader. Increase the emission, just so it's really, really bright. And again, as I said, you can change the colours, so that's why I'm not too fussed about it when I'm drawing it initially, because I always know if I'm not happy with it, I can always change that later. So that's what that looks like, and I'll go to the compositor now and show how that was all put together. Okay, so here in the compositor, again, I'm pretty basic with this. There's probably lots of ways I can do this that's better, but I carry over the general knowledge that I use from the shader panel, and just use the same in compositor. I try and keep all the separate elements in different frames, as you can see here. Just as you can see, it can get pretty complicated. I mean, this is probably not as complicated as a lot of people do, but for me, I get lost. So for the figure, I keep in one panel here. I've got the basic color here, and I've got what I will use for the shade here. And if you remember the mask layer that we did earlier in grease pencil, I have here to use as a factor to determine exactly where I want the shade and where I want the base color to be. And then it's a case of using the image editor here to match up the colors, because sometimes when you're playing, it overlaps with the other elements like the background. It just doesn't sit right what you've got drawn. So you can use the nodes as I've got here. I roughly use the same sort of setup each time, but obviously it's just mashed up to get the general look. So that's the figure section. Got the blast that I will need at the rear. It's the same thing, but what I've got is it running in and overlaid or underlaid with the figure section here, and again here in the dope sheet I keyframe the opacity, so sometimes the background one will show, and sometimes the background one's here, so sometimes the background one will show and then sometimes the front will show, just to give a bit of depth to where I want it. So that's the blast section. I've got the clouds in the rear. Yeah, so that's all this stuff here with an opacity set alpha node just to lower the opacity for it, and blurred out as well. And what else have we got in here? So stuff here like this is the smoke that we've got in the effects. I think I added that to the, where did I put it? This has been on scale 3. Yeah, I think I just added that on the blast rear section with the smoke for it. Yeah. So again, I'll give a little overview just to show you the different sections, and probably slow it down if it helps you. It's just a rough layout of what I've got to give the overall look. Here again is the this is the setup here. But this you plug in basically if you want to directly render from your render layers. There's the figure section again, and the blast section again. And again, I've rendered out a pass for the background, which we set up earlier, if you remember, with the matching it to the grease pencil block out that we did. Okay, so that's basically everything that went into this. If anyone has any questions, obviously you can feel free to leave them in the comment section. I'll get back to anyone, really, if I've left out anything. And yeah, I'll leave it at that.